We're on Facebook Live and Twitter with our post show, continuing our discussion about the impeachment hearings. I know you wanted to say something, Yvonne, and then we have a question as well, so go ahead.
Yeah. So I think a lot about how we got to the impeachment proceedings, and out of all of the misconduct and illegality that has happened, particularly discriminatory and racist things, why is this what triggers the impeachment? And I fear sometimes that it's the fact that the brunt of the offenses coming from the White House have been borne by people of color and immigrants. And so that hasn't resonated enough for purposes of impeachment. But now with going after a political candidate, that's what gets the impeachment process rolling.
I think it's something else. I think it's related to that. But I think there's this whole notion of what this gets back to what I was talking about before, what the ideal of America is. Now, we always know America is full of contradictions. It's racism, it's ethno-nationalism, it's sexism, everything. It's a brutal history. But people have this ideal of what America is. And the notion that a president would basically bribe another president in this time in the Ukraine, it sort of contravenes the assumption or the ideal of what America is. Presidents don't do that. Well, presidents do that. I mean, but we have not seen. We've never seen it out loud. We've never heard a phone call. We know the United States for years had basically, especially during the 50s, for example, in the 60s, subverted nations. From the Belgian Congo at the time to Guatemala to Nicaragua. We know that. But the notion of it being out in the open, a phone call, something so blatant as, I want you to do me a favor, though, I think it sort of, for many people, it subverts the ideal of America. And I think that is what brought it to the impeachment stage. Because the racism, folks are going to let that go. They let Mexican rapists go. They let the Arab Muslim ban go. We let grab him by whatever go before he became president. We let a lot of things go, but there's some things that sort of contravene the ideal for some folks. The folks who are in a position to bring charges of impeachment. For them, it breaks the ideal.
Well, look at Richard Nixon. He fought this. He was fighting what I considered, in many ways, an illegal war, but that didn't bring him down. He was popular. Right. He won in '72 by the largest advantage in American political history, and that didn't bring him down. What brought him down, believe it or not, as people should realize, is he was attempting to cover up a burglary of the Democratic National Committee headquarters. That's what brought him down. It wasn't any of his policies. It wasn't any of his warmongering. That's what brought him down. And in the same sense, I think maybe it won't bring Trump down, but I think it's going to. There's no question in my mind that with a vote on impeachment, I don't think he's going to get convicted.
No.
But it's going to have some political damage beyond the damage that he might already be suffering for his policies.
Well, I would say that a couple of things came together. Marcus, and I'll take you. Remember, we're in this time where people have witnessed him on a whim change foreign policy.
Yes.
So now imagine, you've done your Syria thing back and forth. Now your Kurds back and forth, and now we find out you were on a phone call, appearing to be once again supporting Russia's position with Ukraine. Yeah. And I think that is what people are like, whoa. And you're putting our military aid in the middle of that? Yeah. No. We know you're all stuck on 2016, but this is beyond. This, everyone knows. That's why when people kept asking, all the journalists keep asking the congresspersons, don't you think it's wrong to have foreign interference? And they would go this way and this way, those that didn't want to answer the question. And the other ones, no matter where they stood in terms of support of President Trump, said, yes, it's wrong. Then they would go on to say, but I don't know whether I want to impeach him, but yes, it's wrong. Because they know it is. Yeah. Marcus, you wanted to say something.
Well, yeah, I was just going to say from before, overwhelmingly, I feel like my students, they have somewhat the opposite view. It's not that, going back to the question of, like, why is this that's taking them down? So I ask my kids a series of factual questions. themselves about what's going on with the impeachment. But then I also ask them their opinion. And overwhelmingly, they say, yes, Trump should be impeached. But they don't really bring up the phone call. They bring up his racism. They bring up his xenophobia.
Right.
I mean, they feel that and they understand that. And they
Right.
say, basically, he's not fit. He's a bad president. They don't appreciate his tweets, his language. And that's what's really moving them, for sure. Yeah.
So the Facebook question is from people saying, all right, we talked about trying to engage and get through to young people about what's happening. But Yvonne, picking up on what you said, how do you get adults engaged and focused on why this is important and why it matters?
I think we need to talk about checks and balances in a way that's accessible to people. Because I think once you explain that these institutions are meant to provide accountability for each other, right? You have the courts, which I think have been extraordinarily active because lawyers like me, like my organization, Lawyers for Civil Rights, have been very active in suing the Trump administration over the unconstitutional policies. And so people are starting to realize the importance of having independent judicial review. And people are concerned when they see the Kavanaugh confirmation, for example, for the Supreme Court. I just read this week that we have reached a point where over 25% of federal judges are now Trump appointees.
Yes,
so
of course.
this is something that should be concerning to all of us about the lack of judicial independence and the federal courts not being viable vehicles for seeking judicial redress. But I think the more people understand the interplay between courts and the White House, Congress and the White House, I think that motivates people to want to vote and to remain civically engaged and active, whether that's calling a congressman or calling a city councilor. I think that's important. I think we have to, at the end of the day, we have to make sure that people understand that the government is there to serve them and not the other way around.
Spot on. I mean, the whole notion of checks and balances, I think you're absolutely correct. And the erosion of those checks and balances are already being felt.
Yeah.
Some of those judges, among those judges appointed by the Trump administration and approved by the Federalist Society, that's where this is coming from the Federalist Society. One fellow had explicitly racist comments about Arabs and Islam. Explicitly racist. Had said extraordinarily sexist things about his female colleagues and so on and so forth. Nevertheless, was confirmed by the Republican majority in the Senate. And it is, I think, imagine a Supreme Court that basically agrees with every single thing that that's put before it by the Trump administration. Not just we're not just talking about his personal taxes. We're talking about DACA, for example. There's a good chance, but we saw this past week that DACA, the Dreamers, the executive act passed by Obama for those so-called Dreamers, 700,000 young people in this country who are under the age of 30. There's a very good chance, we understand now, that the Supreme Court will basically side with the Trump administration to end DACA, thus forcing some type of compromise between Trump and the Democratic House. What that compromise will likely demand, and I'm putting compromise in quotations, is basically completion of the border wall and an end to legal immigration for large portions of people coming into this country.
The only thing that's going to temper that is that the decision is coming out right in the middle of the 2020 campaign.
That's right.
And they don't want to talk about that. They never want to talk about it.
Well, that's the Senate. The White House might be very well.
Well, the White House can talk all they want to, but
right.
the only thing that can happen if the Supreme Court rules in his favor is if anything's going to happen, it has to go to Congress.
That's right.
And no one's talking about it.
Yeah.
So there you go.
Yeah.
So there's, and now you're facing 700,000 people being deported. How does that work? Yeah. So this is a big old mess.
It's a big mess, but I don't think they can be silent about it. I think that it will.
Well, but you're assuming they're going to do something.
No, I'm assuming what will happen is that the White House will demand some type of compromise.
Well, they can demand all you want to, but this in the middle of the. I'm telling you, nothing's going to happen.
We'll see. We'll see.
Kelly, can I take a crack at the question about what not the youth, but the older, us older people, people like myself. And I think they've got to. I think we've got to tell them to look beyond the health of their investment portfolio, which might be good under the Trump administration, and really look at their kids and their children and their grandchildren and say, what's the model we want to have for the world they're going to live in, and forget about personal behavior. Do you want a guy that has this attitude towards women, and the handicapped, and and all that? You want this guy to have this attitude towards people coming across our border, children and families? Is this the guy that we want to have as a model for our children and our people? Do you want the environment that this guy is going to help leave us with? Is that the environment you want? That's what we've got to tell our older people, to look beyond. And by the way, I'm not an ageist. I believe we can think about it. I think the older we get, we think about legacy. We think about a world that we're not going to live in, but our children are going to inhabit. And the question is, do we want this guy and these policies and these attitudes to prevail? Or do we want this guy removed? And unfortunately, you can't remove a president for being a racist. You can't. But there is a vehicle. Impeachment is a legitimate one. And by the way, he's handed us the way to do it. And that's maybe his best gift to us, is that phone call. And I agree, there's other things to do, but the phone call is a way, I think, for people to understand. They understand corruption, they see it there. And it may be the vehicle, at least, not to remove him from office, but to really hasten his removal from office should he run in the 2020 election.
Well, I would even underscore what you just said about people asking themselves, do they want their kids to experience this? And I would go so far as to say most movements are fueled by people saying, I might not be here to see it,
right.
but the people coming behind me are not going to face this. I'm just putting it all out there because I'll be damned if whoever comes behind me has to face this.
Our reach has to exceed our grasp, right? It's the struggle that it's not getting to the end. This is Martin Luther King, right? He may not get there with us.
That's right. That's
But
right.
there is some suggestion that that's happening because you do have a new poll out, which I think might surprise the White House. It's a new CBS poll that shows that only about 30% of the people feel that it's the economy that is going to drive their vote in 2020.
Oh, here's the other poll, though, Philip.
Please.
His approval ratings have gone up.
That's true.
They dipped and now they're gone back up.
That's true. But the aggregate
I
polls,
find that to be.
The aggregate polls has them at the same position at 43%. The average polls in terms of the 538.
I don't care about the fact that it's going in that direction.
No, I'm just saying.
Telling to me.
I'm just saying. No, it's actually
yeah.
more. It's more steady, which is even more problematic. To use that term. I mean, you would hope that those based on what he's done, that those polls would go down. But right now he's still at 43%.
So that just makes you question. Well, what are people? Not question, but I'm just assessing what people are seeing and interpreting. Okay, here's another question about the whistleblower. Should the whistleblower would the testimony mean something? Should the whistleblower be brought forward and obviously give up?
Not if it reveals his or her identity.
Well, that's what would have to happen. Yeah.
I think the identity of the whistleblower is irrelevant at this point.
Well,
so many people have corroborated what the whistleblower has said. At this point, it doesn't matter.
Okay.
Right.
Yeah.
All right. Let me turn to because we've been talking about the impact on the presidential election. Let's talk about the latest person to join the crowded field or the Democrats, and that's Deval Patrick. Everybody surprised he got in at this point? I was too. I thought he really was out. And now that he's in, what do you think?
And you're looking at
no. I just looked left. I can look at Paul.
I'm fine to get started. I think I have to say that I have had personally, I've had difficulty coalescing around one particular candidate. Like I feel that it is still a very crowded field, and that each of the candidates represents different pros and cons. And so, frankly, I could see the appeal, of Governor Patrick deciding, well, if there are people who are still thinking like Ivan, maybe I should get in there and throw my hand in the ring and see what happens and see if maybe that helps to coalesce. So I think it's a very practical consideration, though I was surprised because it is the tail end. Mm-hmm. And at this point, I thought we were going to start narrowing the field as opposed to expanding it to give us more options. Right. And I do fear that the more we stay with multiple candidates as opposed to starting to coalesce around one, it makes this a messier process.
Mm-hmm. I mean, I think Deval Patrick could potentially be the candidate we're looking for, considering I think any of those candidates would be a better alternative than Trump. But I think, again, it goes back to the noise and the messiness. It's just too much to focus on. I mean, too many websites, too many social media. I mean, the media platform we're on right now, Facebook, is contributing to just so much of the noise that's out there, and it's so hard for people. Even if a Democrat has a message that is compelling, it's just so hard to break through with all of the noise. And the Republicans, Donald Trump in particular, for all the ill that we can kind of say about him, he is so able at distorting and distracting and contributing to the noise. We see this.
I think Deval Patrick does think there's a way to get through the noise. And the noise is going to be, if this impeachment process goes through, there's a theory that the trial goes to the Senate, and the Senate is going to lock down, Barney. It's going to lock down Elizabeth Warren. It's going to lock down Kamala Harris. It's going to lock down Booker. It's going to lock down a lot of these Amy Klobuchar, and they're going to be sitting there perhaps for 6 or 7 or 8 weeks for this Senate trial, with their hands folded, and they're going to have to sit there. They can't go running out there campaigning. Mm-hmm. And it's going to open up an opportunity for somebody like Deval Patrick to break through. That's him and Buttigieg and Biden, who are not so hampered by this. So I think he thinks there's a way for him to capture the spotlight very quickly and attention very quickly, because he's going to be free and his opponents are going to be hamstrung. Now, having said that, it's still a difficult thing. A year ago, not as a personal judgment, but as an assessment, I thought Deval Patrick would be the strongest candidate to run for the nomination a year ago. I think now he's not the strongest candidate. It still is a Hail Mary, which he's described his own capacity. But I remember going back. I showed a film on Shirley Chisholm, Unbought and Unbossed, 1972. Mm-hmm. She announced for the presidency of the United States on January 25th, 1972. January 25th, 1972. And you say, wow, she really got into the game late. Edmund Muskie, I think, announced it like a month earlier. He was the favorite. So this notion that you have to get in years in advance, at least under, maybe it's different now, maybe that's the feeling.
I think it is. Yeah.
But I think he's thinking that if there is a vacuum, there's an opportunity for him to get some real attention and have some real freedom to move while others might be stuck. And it's his principal competition. His principal competition is going to be Warren. His principal competition is Barney. But I think this notion, I think it's bad for the Democrats because there's a seem desperation. You need the guy to come in and save you. And I actually think it's a strong Democratic field myself.
Well, here's the problem, and I think here's what happened. I think that there was sort of a sense of inevitability, first with Biden and then with Warren.
Really?
Yeah. I think. Well, I think with Biden. I think when Biden started, he demonstrated, history, gravitas, so on and so forth. Then people started seeing him in the field, and he seemed very unsteady. And in debate, he was very unsteady. Elizabeth Warren kept rising, and so on and so forth. The problem for Warren was, for many people, was the deconstruction of her Medicare plan. Folks started looking at that plan and said, "Wow, it can't work, and if it does work, I'm going to be taxed disproportionately." And a lot of this was noise, and a lot of it was not even true. But there was some. But when she revealed what it was going to cost, $20 trillion, folks can't get their head around the notion of $20 trillion. But also, you saw our own plutocrats starting to panic. Wall Street started to panic and say, "Oh my God, Elizabeth Warren could possibly be the candidate." they started putting out the feelers. You have Bloomberg,
Yeah.
a billionaire worth $50 billion, who's now running.
No, he said he might.
Who said he might run.
Yeah.
Our latest poll showed that he would be, in a popular poll,
Yeah.
not state by state, 6 points ahead of Donald Trump. Okay, now with Deval Patrick, I think Deval Patrick, for perhaps for different reasons, said, wow, I see an opening here. And I think your point about the Senate is correct. But there's another opening. I think he looks at not winning Iowa. He's not going to come anywhere close. But he could possibly win New Hampshire. Yeah. New Hampshire serves as momentum. Momentum for what? South Carolina. Kamala Harris's campaign has imploded. The only other African American, besides Cory Booker, in the race, and basically feels that campaign is imploded.
Okay.
So then Deval Patrick says that's an opening. They're occupied in the Senate. I'm here in New Hampshire. I go to South Carolina. I build up momentum. I think that's what's happening. But I think we cannot underestimate also the fear that's being generated on Wall Street. Deval Patrick, for a great story, he has a great story to tell, coming up from Chicago, so on and so forth. But I think there's also a feeling that he's safe. He's safe for the Bains of the world. He's safe. He's safe for Wall Street,
which is exactly why I believe
Yeah.
a lot of people are not. That we can love everybody before they get on the stage, the national stage. That when the Bain stuff comes up, when the mortgage stuff comes up, when all this other stuff comes up, that's a lot to fight.
Yes, it
also,
is.
America not ready for another black man as president. Y'all can say what you want, and he is a very experienced politician. I think he gave one of the best speeches ever in my mind was when he was governor and talked about accepting those refugees and opening up the army base.
That's right.
But in this atmosphere now, watch how that speech is going to be ripped up in shreds.
I think you're right. I think it's different.
So I'm just saying that there's a lot of pros and cons. It's a totally different time. I also think he risks looking like he's arrogant. No one here was good, and I'm here for you. So he has to deal with that too.
Yeah.
So it's going to be very interesting. And by the way, nobody knows him nationally. He knows Barack, but
well, they know him in New Hampshire, but you're right.
Okay, that's not nationally.
No, but we're talking about strategy.
No, I think he'll be.
And I think that's part of his strategy.
His brilliance in coming, the way he came out, that was a brilliant strategy. So we'll see more as it comes along.
Right.
Anyway, more for this. I'm sure we'll be back in this circle talking about where he is in about a month or two. So I thank all of you for joining me,
Thanks,
fellow
Kevin.
Paul,
Thank you, Kevin.
Yvonne, and Marcus. Thanks so much.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.